Okay, so the question is, can you convert a Bryce object into a terrain? And there are three answers to this. Yes, no, and kinda. So let's deal with the easy ones first. The yes answer. I'm just going to put a sphere here and a cylinder here, and I want to convert one of these things into a mesh, or rather into a terrain, as is what was requested. So we're just going to select the sphere, go to the edit menu, and you see this little double arrow here. Click on that, hold it down, and lift it off when you get to the mesh. And voila, your sphere is converted into a terrain. However, I have a strong and funny suspicion that this is not exactly what the person who asking the question wanted. What they're really asking is, can you convert an object into a mesh that looks exactly like the object? And the answer to that is no. And so we come to the final kinda answer, which is rather difficult. Kinda is a dodgy way. In fact, there are two dodgy ways to do this. One is using the combine feature. Now, in order to use the combine feature, you have to have boolean objects in your scene. So you can't say directly convert a cube into a mesh, but if you made a boolean object out of that cube, for instance, you intersected that cube with another cube that was just slightly bigger than the one, and you group them together, you could convert that into a mesh using the combine method. So what I have here, I'll just do one level of ungrouping here, is I have a series of objects arranged in one axis, and this particular middle section, which is a torus carving out a groove in a sphere. If you get a close-up of that, just a little render, we can see that there's a little bit of a gouge happening through the sphere. Now this is a boolean object, it's been grouped, so what I can do is select that object, click C, and now it is a combined mesh. Right? It's a terrain. You can still stretch it and alter it in certain ways, but you can't really dynamically use it anymore. What's more, this is kind of a dead switch. You can't go backwards. Now, me personally, I've had a few misgivings with the combine method. Sometimes I've had ghost artifacts, models, that just remain there and cannot be deleted. So I don't tend to use that method, and I just keep Boolean objects as Boolean objects these days. This is goes for both Bryce 6 and Bryce 7. Another way of doing it, I'm just going to just reload this image, or this model. Another way of doing it is using altitude maps. And here's where things get a little bit hairy and there's a bit of planning involved. An altitude map takes a look at your scene, works out what are the lowest elements, what are the highest elements, and paints the entire scene in levels of grey to represent low to high. At this moment, this model is lying at 0 BU. If we were to render it normally, we get this image. But if we were just to look at it from a height perspective, we'd see this area is low, the bottom of the sphere is low, the top of this fin is high, the top of the sphere is high. So if we were to render it using Bryce's altitude mask, we get a slightly different image. Now the shading has got nothing to do with light. It's all to do with height. So the lowest fin here is darkest, the highest fin here is lightest. Light on high, dark underneath. If we were to take a top view and do a render, because there is no ground plane, bottom is infinitely away, so it's ultimately black. This is the highest point of the model, so it's white. So what you can do here is render out an image, preferably as high a resolution as you can get, bring it back into Bryce, load it as a picture terrain, and then create a symmetrical lattice out of it to reproduce the basics of the shape. Now, it's not perfect. Let's take a look at it. We've got our image. We'll save the image, and then we'll create a new scene. can go about recreating this object. So we'll create a terrain, get into the terrain lab, get into our pictures tab, load our picture, adjust the blending so that we get the highest contrast possible, and then apply. If you take a look at this image, it's a little distorted because we originally saved a rectangular image, and in order to get a really good representation of what you're rendering, you really want to render a square image. But we'll go with this and see where it takes us. Already we can see something that occurs with this method, and that's called stepping. Rather than the smooth, globular items that we were used to, now we're getting these pyramidal steps into our design. That is probably not what we're after. The way to get around that is to do two things. First, increase the resolution or size of your rendered image. The second is, before you bring the image in, change the resolution of your mesh. We could try going to 2048, that'll be a huge mesh, and we'll just bring the picture in again. Some minor alterations here. Remember, we're working with a very low end resolution image, so we're bound to see some stepping. The final step of this, because this was a rather symmetrical ship, is to turn it into a simlat, or symmetrical lattice. First step is to cut away the black. If you don't see this palette, it's under here. Head back to the main view, and then convert this terrain into a simlat. Now, it might not seem to look a hell of a lot like what we originally started with, but with a bit of tweaking, we can get it approximately there, and it may turn out to be a shape that you're more after. Both methods have their challenges. The combined method may be a little unreliable. This altitude method may reduce the stepping or reduce the smoothness of how you want to go about it. But with a little experimentation on your resolution of your images, resolution of your initial mesh, you might find an acceptable compromise, or perhaps an inspiration that will lead you on to design something better.